Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking into a true crime case that's both intriguing and unsettling. A murder in Dallas, right in the middle of that 2020 pandemic, with twists and turns that would make even the most seasoned detectives scratch their head.
Yeah, you've provided a fascinating collection of sources for this deep dive. Articles from local newspapers, court testimonies, even an episode from the Anatomy of Murder podcast. Clearly, you're looking for a pretty comprehensive understanding of this case.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. The victim was Jamie Faith. He was an executive at American Airlines. He was shot multiple times while walking his dog with his wife. I mean, just at first glance, it sounds like a completely random act of violence.
Yeah, on the surface, perhaps. But
Yeah.
when we start digging into the details a little bit more, you'll see that this case is anything but ordinary. The crime scene itself tells a very different story.
Okay, well, let's unpack this. Can you kind of set the scene for us? Where did this happen, and what were some of the initial details that stood out to investigators?
Okay, so picture a quiet residential street in Oak Cliff, a neighborhood in Dallas. It's 7:30 a.m. on a Friday morning. Suddenly, the peace is shattered by the sound of multiple gunshots. Neighbors rush out to find a chaotic scene, a man lying dead on the sidewalk, his wife screaming for help.
Multiple gunshots in broad daylight on a residential street. Yeah, that definitely doesn't sound like a typical robbery gone wrong. What else did the police find at the crime scene?
The brutality of the murder was striking. Jamie Faith wasn't just shot once or twice. He was shot 7 times. 3 to the head, 3 to the chest, and 1 to the groin. You know this was overkill, a clear indication of rage and a personal motive.
That's chilling. And you mentioned his wife was present during the attack. What did she tell the police?
Jennifer Faith, James' wife, was understandably distraught. She told police that a masked gunman appeared seemingly out of nowhere, shot Jamie at close range, and then subdued her with duct tape.
It's hard to imagine the trauma of witnessing something like that. Did she provide any details about the attacker or a possible motive?
Unfortunately, no. She couldn't offer a description beyond the fact that he was wearing a hoodie and a mask, and she claimed to have no idea who would want to harm Jamie.
So the police were left with a dead husband, a distraught wife claiming to have no knowledge of the attacker, and a very public crime scene. Where did they even begin to investigate?
Well, they started by focusing on Jamie Faith, trying to uncover any potential enemies or motives that might have led to this brutal attack. They interviewed his family, friends, and colleagues, digging into his past to see if anything could shed light on the killer's identity.
And what about Jennifer? Was she considered a suspect at this point?
Initially, no. She was seen as a victim, the grieving widow who had witnessed a horrific crime. The community rallied around her, offering support and raising money through a GoFundMe campaign. She even appeared on local news, pleading for anyone with information to come forward.
So you have a seemingly happy marriage, a brutal murder with no clear motive, and a community rallying around the grieving widow. It sounds like the classic setup for a true crime mystery.
It certainly does. But as the investigation dragged on with no solid leads, detectives decided to turn their attention to the digital world, a treasure trove of information in modern criminal investigations.
Ah, the digital trail. What did they find on Jamie and Jennifer's phones that might be relevant to the case?
At first glance, nothing out of the ordinary. But as they dug deeper into the data, they uncovered something that completely changed the direction of the investigation. Remember Jennifer's claim that she couldn't think of anyone who would want to harm Jamie?
Right, she presented this image of a happy and loving marriage.
Well, that facade started to crumble when detectives discovered that Jennifer had been having an emotional affair with an old high school sweetheart named Darren Lopez.
Hold on, an affair. So maybe this wasn't a random act of violence after all.
Exactly. And to make things even more suspicious, they discovered that Darren Lopez drove a black Nissan Titan pickup truck.
Don't tell me. The same type of truck witnesses saw fleeing the crime scene.
You got it. Suddenly, the focus of the investigation shifted dramatically. The grieving widow was no longer just a victim. She was a potential suspect, and her secret lover was now a person of interest in the murder of her husband.
This is where things start to get really interesting. Who was this Darren Lopez, and what was his connection to Jennifer?
Darren was an Army veteran, decorated for his service in Iraq. He had earned a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, but he was also dealing with the lingering effects of a traumatic brain injury. By 2020, he was back in Tennessee, divorced and reconnecting with old friends online, including Jennifer.
So their online communication rekindled an old flame. Was it just harmless flirting, or did things get more serious?
Their relationship escalated quickly, becoming intensely romantic. However, according to Jennifer's emails and text messages, there was a major problem. She claimed that Jamie was abusive.
Abusive, but she presented this picture of a perfect marriage to everyone else.
That's the point. She was telling two very different stories. To Darren, she painted a horrific picture of abuse, physical violence, sexual torture, even threats on her life.
Wow, those are serious allegations. Did she offer any proof to support these claims?
She claimed she did. She sent Darren photos of supposed injuries and even an email, allegedly from Janie, threatening to kill her if she didn't end the relationship.
And remember, Darren was a soldier, trained to protect others. It seems like Jennifer knew exactly how to play on his instincts.
Precisely. And according to Darren, this is what led him to drive from Tennessee to Dallas on the day of the murder. He believed Jennifer was in imminent danger and felt compelled to act.
Act. He shot Jamie Faith in cold blood.
We'll get to the details of the shooting, but keep in mind that we're only hearing Darren's side of the story at this point. The police still needed to gather evidence to corroborate his claims and determine Jennifer's level of involvement.
So they had a suspect, a potential motive, and a lot of unanswered questions. What happened next?
Well, after confirming Darren's identity and his military background, the police, along with ATF agents, decided to make the arrest during a traffic stop. They didn't want to risk a confrontation at his home, especially since he had teenage daughters living with him.
That makes sense. A potentially armed veteran with a possible motive for murder is a situation you want to handle with extreme caution. What happened during the arrest?
Surprisingly, it went smoothly.
Yeah.
Darren cooperated with the authorities and was taken into custody without incident.
So they finally had their suspect in custody. Did he confess to the murder?
He didn't give a full confession initially, but he admitted to knowing Jennifer and having contact with her. The investigators strategically revealed some of the evidence they had gathered, like the phone records showing a massive amount of communication between them.
Sounds like they were playing a bit of a cat and mouse game, trying to get him to crack.
Exactly. They wanted him to realize they were closing in on him. But Darren eventually clammed up and refused to talk further without a lawyer.
Smart move on his part, I guess. But the police weren't going to let that stop them, right?
Of course not. While they couldn't get a confession out of Darren, they had enough evidence to obtain a search warrant for his home in Tennessee.
What did they find?
A treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Letters from Jennifer, credit cards in her name, gifts, even a huge TV still in the box addressed to Darren from Jennifer. This wasn't just casual online flirting. They were clearly deeply involved.
And remember, Jennifer initially denied having any romantic relationship with Darren. Those lies were starting to unravel pretty quickly.
They were. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. During the search of Darren's house, they found the murder weapon, a gun with what appeared to be blood on it. Later forensic testing confirmed it was Jamie Faith's blood.
Wow, talk about a smoking gun. Case closed, right?
Not so fast. While the gun was a major breakthrough, it didn't tell the whole story. Remember, Darren claimed he was acting to protect Jennifer. The police needed to figure out just how much she knew about his plan and what role she played in all of this.
Right, because if she truly believed Jamie was abusing her, she might be considered a victim, not an accomplice.
Exactly. And that's where things get really complicated. The police had to delve deep into the relationship between Jennifer and Darren, sifting through thousands of text messages and emails to understand the dynamics of their twisted love affair.
So what did they find in those messages? Was there any indication that Jennifer knew Darren was planning to kill Jamie?
That's the million-dollar question. But before we get into that, let's take a closer look at Darren's background. We know he was a decorated soldier, but what kind of person was he before he reconnected with Jennifer?
Good point. Understanding his character might help us understand how he got entangled in this mess.
Exactly. And the more we learn about Darren, the more perplexing this case becomes. Remember, he had suffered a traumatic brain injury during his service.
Right, you mentioned that earlier. Could that have played a role in his actions?
It's certainly a possibility. Traumatic brain injuries can have a profound impact on a person's cognitive abilities, emotional regulation, and judgment.
So he might have been more susceptible to manipulation or impulsive behavior.
That's one theory. But the prosecution in Darren's case argued that his brain injury didn't absolve him of responsibility for his actions. They believed he knew exactly what he was doing, and that he was motivated not just by love for Jennifer, but also by greed.
Greed? What do you mean?
Well, remember all those gifts Jennifer sent him? The credit cards, the plane tickets, the money from the GoFundMe campaign.
Oh, right. She was showering him with financial support.
Exactly. And the prosecution argued that this financial incentive, along with Jennifer's fabricated tales of abuse, played a key role in convincing Darren to kill Jamie.
This is getting more and more disturbing. It sounds like Jennifer was manipulating him from the start. But did she explicitly ask him to kill Jamie? Was there a clear moment where they plotted the murder together?
That's the tricky part. Despite the overwhelming evidence of their affair and Jennifer's web of lies, there was no smoking gun message where she directly ordered the hit. However, the sheer volume and content of their communication painted a very incriminating picture.
What do you mean? What kind of things were they discussing?
Their conversations went far beyond just romantic expressions. They discussed practical matters, like the fact that Texas requires front and rear license plates and the best routes to take to avoid traffic cameras.
So they were talking about how to get away with murder.
It certainly seems that way. And perhaps the most damning evidence of all was their complete lack of remorse after the murder. They never discussed the crime itself, instead focusing on mundane details like planning funerals, collecting life insurance payouts, and making plans for the future as if nothing had happened.
That's just cold-blooded. It's hard to believe that someone could be so callous and manipulative.
It is. But remember, we're still trying to piece together the truth from a mountain of evidence and conflicting accounts. The question of Jennifer's culpability, whether she was a victim of circumstance or a master manipulator, is one that the courts had to grapple with.
So what happened to Darren and Jennifer? Did they both go to trial for Jamie's murder?
They did, but their legal journeys took very different paths.
Okay, so we've got two trials to unpack here. Let's start with Darren. What was his defense strategy?
Well, his lawyers argued that he was suffering from diminished mental capacity due to his traumatic brain injury. They painted him as a love-struck soldier, manipulated by this cunning woman, preying on his vulnerability. They argued that he truly believed Jennifer was in danger and that he was acting heroically to save her.
So they were basically saying he wasn't in his right mind and couldn't be held fully responsible for his actions. Did the jury buy it?
Not entirely. While the jury acknowledged the potential impact of Darren's brain injury on his judgment and actions, they ultimately found him guilty of murder.
And what was his sentence?
He was sentenced to 62 years in prison. A pretty hefty sentence. But some legal analysts believe that the jury's recognition of his mental state, might have factored into their decision.
That makes sense. It's a complex situation trying to weigh the impact of a traumatic brain injury on someone's actions, especially in a case as emotionally charged as this one. What about Jennifer? What happened in her trial?
She actually never went to trial. After Darren's conviction, she decided to cut a deal with the prosecution.
Really? Why would she do that if she was innocent?
Well, the evidence against her was pretty damning. The affair, the lies, the communication with Darren leading up to the murder. Her lawyers likely advised her that a trial would be risky, especially considering the outcome of Darren's case.
So what kind of deal did she make?
She pled guilty to a federal charge of using interstate commerce in the commission of murder for hire.
Wait, a federal charge? I thought this all happened in Texas.
It did, but because her communications with Darren crossed state lines, all those calls, texts, emails, it opened the door for federal prosecution. And the federal charge carried a significant advantage for Jennifer.
What do you mean?
The feds don't have the death penalty. By pleading guilty to this federal charge, she avoided a potential death sentence.
Wow, that's a huge difference. So what was her final sentence?
She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
So both Jennifer and Darren will be spending the rest of their lives behind bars. What was the reaction of Jamie's family and friends to the outcome of these trials?
Well, they were relieved that justice had been served. But, their sense of relief was undoubtedly mixed with profound sadness and betrayal. Remember, Jennifer had fooled everyone, playing the role of the grieving widow perfectly. To discover that she was the mastermind behind this horrific plot, is a devastating blow.
It's hard to fathom the level of deception and manipulation involved in this case. Looking back, were there any red flags that people missed? Any hints that Jennifer might be capable of something like this?
Hindsight is always 20/20, right? But the chilling truth is that Jennifer was incredibly skilled at concealing her true nature. She presented this carefully constructed facade of normalcy, and even those closest to her were completely blindsided.
It's a sobering reminder that appearances can be deceiving even in seemingly idyllic relationships.
Absolutely. And this case also raises important questions about the potential dangers of online relationships. Jennifer and Darren's entire twisted romance played out in the digital realm, their perception of reality warped by intense emotions and carefully curated online personas.
It's a scary thought, how easily the lines between fantasy and reality can blur in the online world, sometimes leading to real-world consequences, even deadly ones.
This case certainly makes you think. It's a tangled web of love, betrayal, manipulation, and a reminder that even the most meticulously crafted lies will eventually crumble. The digital age might provide new tools for deception, but the truth, in the end, always has a way of surfacing.
Well, this deep dive has certainly been a journey, full of twists and turns, leaving us with more questions than answers.
Exactly. What was going through Jennifer's mind? Was Darren a willing participant, or was he truly manipulated? And could this tragedy have been prevented? These are questions you'll have to ponder on your own, weighing the evidence and drawing your own conclusions.
Thanks for navigating us through this intricate case. It's definitely one that will stay with me.
And for you listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked some important questions in your own mind. Think about the role of technology in our lives, the power of manipulation, and the importance of critical thinking in a world saturated with information. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
You know, it's hard to wrap my head around the fact that Jennifer was able to fool everyone for so long. Was there anything in her past, any hints of this, like dark side that people might have overlooked?
That's the chilling part. There's nothing in the information you've provided to suggest that Jennifer had a history of deceit or manipulation. I mean, those who knew her described her as a loving wife, a devoted mother, a pillar of the community. It seemed that she was able to compartmentalize her life, presenting a completely different persona to Darren while maintaining her carefully crafted public image.
It's a stark reminder that we can never truly know what's going on in someone else's mind, no matter how close we think we are to them.
Exactly. This case is a masterclass in deception. Jennifer not only manipulated Darren, she also manipulated her entire community, the police, even the media. She played the role of the grieving widow to perfection, eliciting sympathy and support while orchestrating a cold-blooded murder.
It's almost like something out of a movie, you know? The seemingly perfect life hiding a dark and twisted secret.
And that's what makes this case so unsettling. It shatters our illusions of safety and predictability, reminding us that evil can lurk beneath the surface of even the most ordinary lives.
It makes you wonder what was going through Jennifer's mind. What was her endgame?
That's the question that continues to haunt investigators and those who knew her. Some speculate that she was driven by greed, eager to collect on Jamie's life insurance policy and start a new life with Darren. Others believe that she was simply tired of her life with Jamie and saw this as a way to escape.
But wouldn't divorce have been a less complicated option?
Logically, yes. But remember, we're dealing with someone who is clearly capable of extreme deception and manipulation. It's possible that she feared a messy divorce, potentially losing custody of her daughter or facing financial repercussions. Or perhaps she simply enjoyed the thrill of the deception, the power she held over both Darren and her community.
It's a twisted psychology for sure. And what about Darren? Was he a willing participant in this scheme, or was he truly a pawn in Jennifer's game?
That's a question that the jury had to grapple with during his trial. His lawyers argued that he was suffering from diminished mental capacity due to his traumatic brain injury, making him more susceptible to manipulation. They presented him as a love-struck soldier, blinded by his feelings for Jennifer and willing to do anything to protect her.
But the jury ultimately found him guilty of murder.
Yes, they did. While they acknowledged the potential impact of his brain injury, they determined that he was ultimately responsible for his actions. The fact that he drove across state lines, brought a gun, and planned the attack indicated a level of premeditation that was hard to ignore.
So both Jennifer and Darren will be spending the rest of their lives behind bars, each paying the price for their roles in this horrific crime.
It's a tragic end to a story that began with so much promise. Jamie Faith, a successful executive with a loving family, was robbed of his life by the very person he trusted most. His wife, Jennifer, the woman who vowed to love and cherish him, turned out to be his ultimate betrayer, orchestrating his murder with the help of a man she had manipulated into believing he was a hero.
It's a case that leaves you with a lot of unsettling questions about the nature of love, trust, and the dark side of human nature.
Absolutely. And it
Yeah.
serves as a powerful reminder that even in the digital age, where we're constantly bombarded with information, it's crucial to be discerning, to question the narratives we encounter, and to remember that appearances can be deceiving.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive. Thanks for guiding us through this complex and disturbing case.
And for you listening, we hope this deep dive has prompted you to reflect on your own experiences and relationships. Remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about the complexities of human behavior, the better equipped we are to navigate the challenges and dangers that life throws our way. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.